The 1904 Olympics, and the dumbest race ever run. Featuring cheating, rat poison, feral dogs, multiple near fatalities, and one competitor running in a beret and slacks. A few points before I begin. Content warning for accidental poisoning and animal attacks. Credit where it's due, my write-up heavily borrows from this article. In the modern day, most Olympic athletes are professionals, and therefore not hobbyists. However, in this particular event, the majority of competitors were not professional athletes, and indeed, many weren't even experienced at long-distance running. The year is 1904, and in St. Louis, the third modern Summer Olympic Games are gearing up to start. Men in boaters and ladies in gowns are filling the bleachers to watch what will become the world's greatest sporting competition. At an event as important as the Olympics, the budget is a blank check. Only the finest professionals are hired to organize every aspect of the competition, guaranteeing a polished showcase of the best sporting talent the world has to offer. Truly, the Olympics is the ideal of a well-organized competition. Yeah, no. The 1904 Olympic Marathon is widely remembered as the worst marathon in history. A series of organizational failures created a truly bizarre race, where everything you can think of, and some things you can't, went wrong. To set the stage, the marathon had 32 competitors. The temperature was 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 Celsius. The track began and ended in the stadium, but the majority of the distance took place on dirt roads, with officials in cars bookending the runners. Fewer than half of the competitors reached the finish line, and several nearly died trying. Here's what went wrong. Giving runners rat poison and brandy instead of water. For the power of science. In the early 20th century, one popular scientific theory argued that water actually reduced athletic performance, rather than enhancing it, and that inducing purposeful dehydration would bring about superior results. Unluckily for the hapless athletes, James Sullivan, the chief organizer of the Olympics at the time, was a strong proponent of this theory. He insisted that there only be a single water station on the entire 26-mile, 42-kilometer course. Hydro homies would be furious. The obvious ill effects of this decision were exacerbated by sweltering temperatures and the incredibly dusty conditions of the race, as runners were forced to remain inside the dust clouds kicked up by the officials' vehicles. The runner coming in second place, American Thomas Hicks, collapsed from dehydration 17 miles or 28 kilometers into the race. Unfortunately for Hicks, his personal trainers were also fans of purposeful dehydration. Instead of hydrating the extremely dehydrated runner, a radical idea, they instead provided him with a cocktail made of rat poison. Specifically, rat poison mixed with egg whites and brandy. Our boy needs his protein and liquid courage, after all. In fact, the only water these trainers allowed poor Hicks was a quick sponge bath, before which the sponges were carefully heated up by the car's radiator. Surprisingly, the rat poison proved effective. Hicks was able to continue running until the 20-mile or 32-kilometer mark, at which point he collapsed a second time and could not be reinvigorated by the world's best running juice. This time around, his trainers had helped carry him over the finish line, which at the time was not a disqualifying offense. By the end of the race, Hicks was hallucinating and incoherent. He was immediately treated by several doctors, who stated that he would likely have died if he had not received prompt medical attention. Hicks lost 8 pounds or 3 kilograms over the course of the race, but luckily made a full recovery. The legend of Felix Carbajal de Soto, mad lad extraordinaire. With a name like that, is it any wonder that Felix Carbajal de Soto is one of the maddest lads in Olympic history? A Cuban postman, de Soto relied on funds raised by his community to afford to travel to St. Louis. This would have worked out fine if he hadn't lost it all on a gambling bender in New Orleans. Out of cash and nearly out of time, de Soto had to frantically hitchhike to St. Louis in time for the starting gun. Indeed, de Soto was so time poor, and just flat out poor, that he showed up having not eaten in 40 hours. And still wearing his formal slacks and a beret. A sympathetic bystander with a pair of scissors helped him convert the slacks into shorts just before the race began. He kept the beret. Since De Soto had no personal trainers to provide him with the food he so desperately needed, he instead snuck into an orchard partway through the race and stole some apples. Unluckily for him, the apples were rotten. De Soto quickly began suffering from severe stomach cramps, so he took a quick nap in the shade to sleep it off. Despite quite literally taking a nap partway through the race, De Soto somehow finished 4th overall. After his stunning performance in the 1904 games, Greece sponsored De Soto to travel to Athens and compete in a marathon in 1906. He didn't show up. De Soto was presumed dead, and his obituary was published in the newspapers. A year later, he arrived back in Cuba on a Spanish steamship, surprised everyone with his non-death, and continued his running career like nothing had happened. I'm still not sure what exactly he was doing while presumed dead, but I can only assume it was wild. The guy who nearly died on the road, or dust, is scarier than you'd think. Remember those constant dust clouds I mentioned? American runner William Garcia certainly does. While running, Garcia ingested so much dust that it quite literally ripped open his stomach lining. Honestly, I was happier in my life before I found out that breathing in dust can rip open your stomach. You all had better appreciate my sacrifice. He was discovered lying prone on the road and emergency surgery was quickly administered. Luckily, Garcia survived. If you're thinking that after someone nearly died attempting to run this course, the officials would have called off the race to save the remaining runners, then you're wrong. The race continued. Who let the dogs out? Interestingly, this marathon boasted the first 2 black African competitors in Olympic history, Tswana tribesman Len Tao and Jan Mashilny. Tao in particular was projected to perform extremely well in the marathon. However, he placed a paltry 9th. The reason has very little to do with incompetent bookies and very much to do with feral dogs, which chased the hapless Tao nearly a mile off course. The race officials either didn't notice one of their competitors fleeing for his life, or were unable to help. I'm still undecided on which option is worse. Unfortunately, Len Tao wasn't given any kind of handicap bonus as compensation for his brush with nature. He had to accept 9th place and be happy about it. Frankly, finishing at all was a considerable achievement amidst the madness. Some good old-fashioned cheating. Meanwhile, the spectators were ignorant of any berets, emergency surgery, wild dogs and rotten apples. They had simply been sitting in the bleachers for hours, waiting for a runner to reappear. Their patience was rewarded when the first place runner returned to the stadium, an American named Fred Laws. The crowd went wild. Laws had his photo taken with Roosevelt's daughter. However, right before Laws accepted the gold medal, a witness stepped up and publicly accused him of cheating. According to the witness, like most runners on the disastrous track, Laws had actually given up 9 miles or 14 kilometers into the race. Exhausted and dehydrated, Laws simply couldn't continue. His sympathetic trainer offered Laws a ride back to the stadium in his car. As fate would have it, the car only managed to carry the pair a further 11 miles or 17 kilometers along the course before breaking down. Laws saw his opportunity and he took it, I suppose. Now rested and rehydrated, and far ahead of the other runners, he simply exited the vehicle and kept running. Unsurprisingly, Laws was disqualified from the race. So who won? Our old friend, of course, Tom Hicks of the brandy and rat poison. Consequences. The 1904 marathon was so terrible that the event was very nearly removed from all future Olympics. Luckily for modern day marathoners, the race retained its coveted Olympic slot. Brandy, rat poison and champagne continued to be favored over water for a few more Olympics, but common sense eventually won the day. De Soto built a career off the race. A few runners nearly died. And now all organizers of future Olympic events can rest assured that, no matter how badly they mess up, they probably can't organize the worst Olympic event in history. The 1904 Olympics were a mess in general. so much so that they had to have the 1906 intercalated games in Athens to rekindle the Olympic spirit afterwards. First of all, they were supposed to be in Chicago, but St. Louis was hosting the Louisiana Purchase exhibition, so the IOC reluctantly gave St. Louis the games instead. The entire event lasted only 5 days, from August 29th to September 3rd, with no events scheduled on the 2nd. A vast majority of the competitors were American, as at that time athletes had to pay their own way to the games, and it was much more expensive for European athletes to cross the Atlantic on a ship to get to St. Louis than it was for them to go to either Athens or Paris, the sites of the previous games. Only 12 countries were represented, and out of 280 total medals awarded, the USA won 239. There's also the matter of Anthropology Days, in which indigenous people who were there as part of the exhibition competed in normal track and field events as well as events like mudslinging, archery, and fighting demonstrations. These events were specifically designed to show the presumed inferiority of non-white cultures to a crowd of thousands of spectators. And then there's everything with the marathon on top of that. That's all folks. Thank you for watching. If you like videos like this one, why not like and subscribe for more? Have a nice evening.